there. So this is episode 2 of season 2 of Mr. Glyn Meets Your Maker with Dylan Kay. Now, we've had a few technical difficulties, so we've gone over to Zoom to record this. So I'm very sorry if you're on YouTube. A couple of people were and would have seen us fluffing about trying to figure it out. But hey, there you go. We've done it anyway. So anyway, hi Dylan. How are you doing, mate?
I'm all right now. Yeah, this is good. This is good. I can see you.
We can see each other and we can hear each other. Isn't that amazing?
It's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
good stuff.
Took a bit of fluffing about. Now, we have known each other for, I'm not sure how long, but it's probably more than 10 years. Would you say?
We moved here 12 years ago now, and I'm pretty sure I would have been knocking on your door with a broken guitar pretty soon after we arrived here. So
yeah,
it'd be 12
yeah,
years.
probably actually, yeah. People who've come over and their instruments have been shipped over quite often would want them looked at immediately. So yeah, you're probably one of those.
Yeah, I think so.
Now I've looked on your website.
Oh.
And it says stuff about you, which is great. And of course, we never really talk about whatever's right in front of us at the time, rather than go back and discuss other things.
Sure.
So it says on your website, so it must be true that you went to Berkeley Guitar School.
I did.
So, how did you get there? You must have done some musical education before.
I did. I mean, I was, like many of us, self-taught for a long time. I did lots of playing, but I was self-taught and then went to the Guitar Institute in London in '95 and did what was their kind of year full-time course. So this was a school set up by a bunch of GIT, Musicians Institute LA guys, and yeah, it was a great school. It was just the only place really that you could go to just play guitar for a year. Fantastic teachers, Sean Baxter, who pops up on YouTube now and again. He was the rock guy there. Dave Kilminster, who plays with Roger Waters, was the other rock guy.
Wow.
And then Ian Scott, who's become a very good friend of mine. A lot of the guys that taught there are the guys that write in all the guitar magazines. So all the Guitar Techniques type guys, and Lee Hodgson, who I think still writes for that. And it was fantastic. It was just I moved to London. I started going to jam sessions, trying to figure my way out, and someone said, "Oh, well, why have you heard about this place? Why don't you go? You might meet some people." So I went there for a year, practiced like a lunatic, and learned lots of stuff that I was then really concerned that I'd have no outlet for. So, I went to London as a pure blues player. That was what I'd grown up with. That's what I wanted to do. And then at the Guitar Institute, got exposed to jazz and, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And was lucky enough to find a couple of guys. They had a drum course and a bass course. So David and Andy, the drummer and bass player, we formed a band with a saxophone player, and for the next 2 years after we finished, we were gigging four times a week in central London. I mean, it was utterly nuts. I don't think you could do that now. But yeah, so we just, went and learnt to play jazz really, and sometimes scary people who could really play jazz came and played with us, and we had our backsides kicked a bit, and that was great. And so I think that was as much of an education as anything else. There was learning all that stuff and then actually being able to apply it and working on it in that way.
So were you listening to jazz at all before that?
No. That's a good point, and I would never recommend this to people, because a lot of people, and I was one of them, they want to study jazz because it sounds like it's juicy and it's gonna, you're gonna learn some good stuff from it. But I think the best way in is through the music. I mean, when I grew up in a little village near Stratford-on-Avon, and I was fortunate enough that my neighbour across the road was a big blues fan, and he's my dad's age, but he had lots of records. He'd lend me one every week, and I'd just try and work out as much as I could. And one of his good friends was a saxophone player who then turned up one day with a box set of Charlie Parker records and said, "Oh, you need to listen to this." And I didn't know what to make of it. I was terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really through. I was talking to someone about this today. Obviously the way that we digest music these days is so different, but trying to find jazz to listen to as some kid in a little village near the Cotswolds, I mean, where would you find it? I wouldn't have even known where to start. And even in London, it was people would lend you a CD or whatever, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it was listening to that music as I was trying to learn it, really, rather than the fact that I'd listened to it lots and had this big desire to play what I'd been
Right.
listening to.
It has to find you at the right time as well, and I think, and music can mean different things to you at different stages in your life as well. The same music, I find, can have, and books are the same. It can really affect you at a certain age, and then you might listen to it later on, and you go, oh yeah, no, I don't quite get that anymore.
Yeah.
But
Well, I found
okay,
that I found that with the blues stuff in a way, just because there is an element, especially when you go and study jazz, that the world is only jazz, and you start listening to other stuff, and you think you kind of look down on it in some weird way or something. I don't know. It's a bit of an odd attitude, and
mm,
a bit of a purist thing that some people get into, and I think I experienced that to a certain extent. So that blues stuff I've been listening to, I put to one side for quite a long time, and then
yeah,
I love it again now, and I'm really glad that I do. But yeah,
yeah.
just got to be careful of like putting on blinkers too much like that.
Yeah, actually, I went to a jazz college as well, but doing guitar making and repair. But it
Oh,
was it was
Leeds,
just, it was Leeds College of Music, yeah, which is a big
which is
jazz,
great. Yeah.
yeah, big jazz place, and it was really interesting because we were completely separate from
Okay.
all of them because we're just the monkeys, the nuts and bolts people. Whereas yes, the hierarchy of different jazz instruments was quite fascinating. So
Yeah.
so so then you go on to Berkeley, and how was that? I mean, did you feel like you were ready for that? Would you not? Surely that's just going to any isn't that
That
going to
was
just expose any any difficulties in your playing?
that was 10 years later. So I went to
Oh,
Berkeley in
okay.
2005. So in the intervening period, I'd been gigging lots. I'd been teaching lots. I really got into teaching after the Guitar Institute, and I ended up teaching at the Guitar Institute. So I was teaching, with all those guys, at a high level, and
Mm.
and teaching privately, and I taught in a few fancy private schools and stuff like that, and so I was busy playing and teaching, and at that time there were kind of less people coming out of jazz colleges, I would say. I mean, the bands I had, we got lots of festival gigs, you know, at least one that I can remember now, we headlined and stuff like that. So we were busy playing and doing stuff. Um, but I don't know, I think I'd secretly always harbored the desire to go to Berkeley, and never really expected that the opportunity would come up. Um, and when it did, it was a big wrench, but it was kind of a good time. I'd been teaching solidly for 10 years and playing and doing all this stuff, and it was a good break, to be honest, to feel like, okay, actually, I can just go somewhere else and focus on playing and learning stuff again. Um,
Right.
what was it like? I mean, it's its nickname is Berserkly, and it's insane. It's utterly insane. I mean, it's bigger now. It's more expensive now, but when I was there were 4,000 students, I think. There was certainly 1,000 guitar players, so the guitar department was huge. Um, and it's tiny. I mean, it's probably expanded again since, but I think it was probably three main buildings in Boston when I was there. So there was the guitar department building, then another one, and then kind of the performance center bit, and they're all just right next to each other. You know, it's ridiculous, but it's this little, you know, microclimate where jazz is all you think about all day long. It's all you talk about. It's all anyone you know talks about. It's extraordinary. And you're in this little bubble going, I know the rest of the world doesn't think like this, but, you know, it's quite cool. um, yeah. And, you know, the teachers there are just insane. I mean, just on another. You know, I was lucky enough to study with Mick Goodrick, who's, you know, the legendary jazz guitar teacher who influenced so many people. He passed away recently, but Mick was incredible. You know, he played with Pat Metheny and Gary Burton's band. He taught all sorts of people. So it's having, you know, having the chance to spend time with someone like that.
Yeah.
And Tim Miller, who's a phenomenal kind of fusion-y jazz guy. I hope he wouldn't mind me calling him that, but a phenomenal player. And then Hal Crook, who was a trombone guy, but like serious high-level improvising. And I used to go and have private lessons with him in this tiny ramshackle studio miles from Boston, and that was always an adventure getting there. And then the big one for me was Tronzo. I mean,
Yeah.
just, and I hesitated to have lessons with him initially, but Rick Peckham, who was the assistant chair of the guitar department at the time, just took me under his wing and kind of said, "You need to have lessons with this guy, and this guy," because he knew I couldn't afford to be there. I mean, I was there for 18 months, so there was no way I could have, you know, that was a stretch. But he said, "You got to study with Tronzo," and I'm going, well, I like slide guitar, but I came here to study jazz. You know, what's slide guitar got to do with jazz? And then I went to Tronzo's first class, and oh, okay, now I understand.
Yeah.
So
It's funny because you mentioned him to me years and years ago, and I put some on out of Dylan thinks he's rates him, and I put it on and went, nah. And that's happened a couple of times. And funnily enough, about 2 weeks ago, we'd already scheduled this chat. I was driving home from a gig because I've been doing a few gigs recently, and it's about 2 a.m, and I thought, I'll give that a shot and put it on. But I think because it was in the car and I had it on really loud, and I could to hear the detail, and yeah, I'm starting to get it now. It's kind of like, I hope everyone goes out today so that I can put this on, because I don't really play it in front of other people. But you can really hit that control. He's yeah.
There is no one. No, I mean he says he retired from the music business in, I don't know when it was, a long time ago. You know, he'd had enough. But yeah, just there's a weird thing called the Guitar Show, which you can rent the videos off Vimeo for, and you can rent them for 3 months. And there's a guitar show. There's loads of, you know, there's Jimmy Page on there, Les Paul, Wayne Krantz. I mean, tons and tons of guys. It was done in the 90s, I think. It's just some guy in just, you know, in homemade studio doing this little public broadcast TV show on guitar players. He's got Tronzo on for one of those, and he plays the Ornette Coleman tune with a pencil, and it is the most unbelievable playing. Like once you've heard that, it's like, okay, there's no one can touch him. He is just monstrous, and like a lot of this stuff, like listening to jazz in the first place, the only way I got into it was hearing it played live. And Tronzo, I mean, just being in the same room, the intensity that he plays with is just off the scale. It's just, yeah, it's just something else. And it utterly changed my view of music and how to work on music, and what music could be, and what jazz could be, and what slide guitar could be. I mean, you know, yeah, I could go on days talking about Tronzo, but I went,
So when you listen to that, now speaking from your position as the most highly qualified guitarist I know, you, are you listening to because I'm listening to him going, wow, all that I can hear that control. I can because I think when you play that if it's an instrument you play, then you've got a sort of picture in your head of what people are doing.
mm.
Although actually it's kind of not really an accurate picture, but you can kind of have a feel for it. But are you listening? Are you going, oh, well, listen, isn't that interesting interval played over a minor seventh or a, are you aware of that, or are you just going, oh, isn't it cool?
Um, yeah, Tronzo's thing is less about intervals over chords and more about little motifs and intervallic motifs. So, you know, the whole thing that we you know we try and learn to play the right scales over chords and play the right notes and all that kind of stuff is kind of irrelevant in the way that he plays. So he's playing what his thing is more, and this is hugely paraphrasing, and but you know my understanding is that it's more driven by melody and by the you know motifs and intervallic relationships. It's not tied to a chord progression. It can not fit that chord at all, but the melody is so strong that it doesn't matter. It almost makes the chord wrong rather than what you're playing, if that makes sense. And
Right.
then he's got an incredibly strong rhythmic sense, so a lot of what he does is kind of more rhythmic based. Um, and he's not a lick player. You know, he's not thinking phrases that he's learnt. It's very interactive um, and I think for me, there's just an intensity and an energy which you know beyond all the notes and all the other stuff. It's just like wow, there's this feeling that you get from this thing that is almost this you're plugged directly into Tronzo's soul or whatever. It's just like ridiculous. You know, I remember having a chat with him once, and he said someone had come up to him and said, "God, I'd hate to be inside your head." You know, after hearing him play, and there's an element of that. It's like, what on earth are you thinking? But yeah, and the fearlessness. I mean, that's one of the big things that you know there is no fear. He will take risks continuously, and that's what makes it for me exciting. It's like it's a bit like the Miles Davis thing where you know you feel like he's going to fall off the edge of a cliff at any moment, but that's what keeps me interested. I can only speak for myself, but I would rather experience and hear that rather than someone who's perfected these flash licks and you know they're going to execute them perfectly, and that's a whole other thing. And you know, of
Mm.
course, you know I respect that enormously. This is a different thing, and but that's kind of you know where my interest lies, I suppose.
So you are an improviser. There must be improvist,
Improvist.
improviser.
I yeah, I tried. I mean, like many of us, I try to be, but yeah, I think so. One of the things that Tronzo would do when I'd come in for a lesson is just start playing and just go right play, and I'm going, well, what are we playing? What's the tune? What are the chords? I was like, shut up, just play. It's like, and he's a scary guy. It's like, all right, okay, I'll get my guitar and I'll play, and so there was just constant like, I'm going to play stuff at you, and you're going to play regardless of whether you have a clue what's going on or not, and it really helped take away that fear of like, oh, but what if I play a wrong note? What if I do the wrong thing? And you know, so for me that had an enormous, it really helped take away that fear. And then I think balanced with that, I don't know, maybe I'm just rubbish at learning licks. I mean, obviously as a kid I learned blues licks and stuff, but I just yeah, I just find it more inspiring to kind of play off what's been played rather than rehash some lick that I've learnt. Um, And there is, I think, obviously I do a lot of teaching, and I teach people to play licks because you've got to start from somewhere, obviously, and vocabulary is great, but there's just an excitement about trying to
Mm.
find something different to play, I suppose.
How do you teach fearlessness?
Mm. I try and make people understand that, because I see the fear all the time. I I try and create an environment where people feel like it's the safest place in the world to play. So if we're jamming, pretty much every single class that I teach, when we do that, and this will be a lot of times a week, I always start the class by saying, just remember, like, I want to hear you make mistakes. I don't want to hear the stuff that you play all the time. I'm going to make mistakes. And that was an interesting thing when I first started teaching, at the Guitar Institute, and I'd be teaching, degree level people and whatever. And some of the organization, shall we say, could have been better. So often you hadn't had a chance to prepare these things that you were expected to teach the next minute. And it was, initially very daunting. But once I got past the point of, okay, I can make a mistake. I'm human as well, and I try and encourage. The way that I play in jam sessions when I'm teaching is the same way. It's like, if I'm going to screw up, I don't care. I'm doing this because I'd rather go for something and miss it than just play the lick that I've spent the last week practicing, so I can impress you with that. And
Mm.
so I think there's that. I don't deliberately make people play over things that pull out a chord progression and go, right, play now. But I try and just make them feel comfortable and understand that that is allowed, and that mistakes are actually okay.
Mm.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe mistakes aren't okay. But I think it just holds you back so that you can't express anything. And I see it with
Yeah,
people where they don't want to play a note because they might play the wrong note. And I'm going,
yeah,
what's going to happen? The
yeah,
your guitar's going to explode.
yeah.
This is supposed to be fun. And I don't know, probably like, I don't know. Did you kind of start, with a bunch of mates playing, making a god awful racket in
Pretty
someone's
much.
garage?
Yeah,
Same
yeah,
here. Yeah, I
yeah.
spent hours doing that. And, you
Mm.
know, in those situations, does it matter if you play a wrong note?
No,
I mean,
and to be honest, I gig, a couple of times a month probably now, um, doing covers, and it doesn't really matter as long as my mistakes don't stuff the rest of the band up. You know, actually, I don't think anyone else notices. Probably the rest of the band will probably notice 50% of my mistakes, and the audience, they don't care. You know,
and then,
as long as the drummer keeps going and the singer looks happy, then nobody notices really.
yeah,
So for me, it's just down to how happy I am. And if I go home going, oh yeah, happy with that, then it's fine. But I mean, I don't get a lot of chance to take any risks with it.
right,
But
right. I think though, if you take away that fear, you just play with a lot more energy, and you know, fun things can happen. Whereas I think
mm,
if you're feeling inhibited all the time, I don't see how that can
yeah, yeah. So you have your slide YouTube, the one finger guitarist YouTube channel.
I do. I do. I had 6 months of doing weekly videos, and as you'll know from doing this stuff, it's pretty intense. Um, and then I had a bit of health stuff, and had to stop for a bit, and haven't really picked it up since. I did a little bit. I'm reasonably active. Like, people ask questions all the time and stuff, and that's cool. And I always answer them. I'm always happy to help. And at some point, I hope to be able to go back and do more on it. But I don't know. As you know, it's a massive time commitment, and yeah, I think when when your health comes knocking on the door, sometimes you have to reevaluate a few
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And one of the things was just that I realized I've been doing so much teaching that I hadn't been focusing on playing as much as I could have been. And I kind of knew that, but you know, having a bit of time kicking my heels, going, what's the meaning of life? But I love doing both, and it's just something had to give at some point.
Mm.
Um, so you know, I get emails. I try and help people as much as I can, and try and keep in touch with people. So hopefully, that'll be something I can do a bit more.
Mm. Hey, look, because this is pretend YouTube live, yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna pretend to read the questions that people have asked about slide playing, yeah.
I'll
Okay.
pretend to answer them, shall I?
Okay, so here we go. Right,
Mm.
and now you might have answered these before.
Okay. Let's find out.
Okay, gauge of strings, action, tunings.
Okay.
What kind of slide?
A big one. Okay.
I suppose you got the other thing of electric and acoustic would be quite different for a couple of those.
Yes.
But are you predominantly electric?
I am. Yes.
Good man. Acoustic guitars are for softies.
Oh yes.
I'll edit that bit.
Okay, good. Yes, edit what I said as well. So yeah, here's the. This is always a tricky one. So when I started studying slide with Tronzo, I had you've done lots of work on it over the years, but an Eric Johnson Strat with tens on with just a normal medium low action. That was it. And
low action. You went for very low action. You're really fussy about your action.
I was hoping you wouldn't remember.
Yes, no.
Yeah,
I remember the 11s in E flat conversations.
Yes.
Anyway,
and then I used so here's the thing. There's a balance between all of these things. It depends partly on the slide that you decide to use. Okay, so if I mean, it all stands to reason. I'm useless at physics. You're not, but so you'll laugh at my description. But basically, you've got a heavy slide and you've got light strings with a low action. You're going to bang against the frets constantly. So if you have a lighter slide, you can play. My goal. Sorry, I'm talking about this in a roundabout way. My goal is to be able to play chordal stuff as well as the slide stuff. So I want to be able to fret notes. I don't want an inch off the fretboard. And I don't think, for me, I don't feel there's any advantage in a massively high action. But if you balance the weight of the slide against the gauge of the strings and the action, then you can find a happy medium where you're able to play without bumping into frets. You're able to, fret the notes. And for me, that's basically 11s. I had a long period in open C, but I've kind of come out of that, and I play in standard tuning now. And I just use 11s on that same Strat with a similar action, and I use a brass slide, which is reasonably light. Those Dunlop stainless steel ones are even lighter. That was what Tronzo used to get us to use because he'd had so many issues with his arm. So the problem with a heavy slide is that it really puts a lot of strain on your arm, and you end up with tennis elbow and RSI.
Oh, okay.
It's really,
wow.
It's really heavy. So you got to be careful. The playing slide comes with a serious health warning because it's addictive. And you say, wow, this sounds great. And then 2 hours later, you're going, oh, my arm hurts.
Okay.
So I don't know if that answers it, but it is that balance between the weight of the slide and my goal is to get the strings as low as I can so that I can play normally, but also be able to play the slide without, too much.
So is that a case of mucking about basically until you
Oh, I've been through so many. I mean, I've got so many unused strings lying around the place because of experimenting, but I mean, thinking about well-known players like Derek Trucks, for instance, who everyone knows. I believe uses 11s. He has a pretty standard setup on his SG, but he uses an incredibly light slide, and he's got a very light touch. So, obviously that works great for him. Those Corocedon bottles are really light.
And Tronzo uses his pinky.
Little finger. So
Little finger.
before I got before I spent time with him, I always use my third finger, and a lot of students I teach find it easier on the third finger. They feel like they've got more control, and I definitely felt that. It took me ages to get used to using my little finger, but the advantage is you can do like big stretches with the slide and your first finger if you want to play like fragments of chords, and then obviously you've got these three fingers, so it's easy to play like normal stuff with these three fingers, and just have the little finger on the slide.
Right. You only need those three. I found out this year because
yes, of course.
I snapped a tendon 2 hours before a gig, so that finger was all floppy and quite unpleasant looking. But yeah, it took 9 months to get this back to actually being able to use. It's fine now, but I had it in a rigid sleeve for 9 months. So all the gigs were done, and it's that A minor shape is the hardest thing. Lead stuff is no issue at all, but because I'm so used to playing lead stuff and starting on the wrong finger and having to adapt to all the other, you know what I mean? Okay, I'm so used to rejigging that, but chords were such a sod to get right to. I'm making lots of little chords. I was ending up doing, couldn't play full bars very easily. I like that open C shape with a bar. I like that.
Okay, yeah.
So I was playing that a lot, but with no root,
Okay.
And just avoiding it.
It's a good way of discovering some interesting sounds,
Yeah. Oh no, and really, it is such a mental exercise when you've got a 4-hour gig and you've got 2 hours to figure that gig out with one less finger.
Yeah.
I finished that gig and I asked the guys if they could pack up for me and take me to the car because I was completely mentally spent.
Right. Oh, wow.
Anyway, she's all good now. But yeah, okay, because naturally I would put a slide on my middle finger.
Okay. Like Bonnie Raitt and all these. Jeff Beck used to do that as well.
Did he? But of course, I can see why that wouldn't help.
I mean, it works for different people. I mean, you see all sorts of things. If you come across, there's an Australian guitar player called Dave Hole. He plays with a slide on his first finger over the top of the neck. It's utterly insane. I saw him and just thought, how you're making it so hard, and he's amazing. He sounds fantastic, but first finger just moving up and down. Yeah, so I mean, my suggestion always to people that I start off with is get used to using your little finger. And then another question, which in the imaginary YouTube live chat might have popped up with the slide, is just, does it need to fit your finger? Because the ones you buy in the music shop generally are massive, and unless you've got huge fingers, and I have tiny fingers, they just rattle around. And as a kid, I used to pat them out with like masking tape and think that you needed to do that. So my answer to that is, I like the ones that fit your finger perfectly. So this happens to be, I don't know if I need to advertise them particularly, but this one here, I'm very happy to advertise. This is a company in the UK called Diamond Bottlenecks. And this is a beautiful slide that was made to fit my finger. So you send them your ring size, and they send you the slide. But here's a slide that they also made that's a bottleneck. Okay, and that's not going to fit my finger or whatever, but it doesn't stop me using it. You just rest your third finger against it, and then you support it that way. So there's no need for it to be a perfect fit. It feels nice when it is, but lots of people use different things, and you just support it with another finger.
So like I play guitar, but I'm not a slide player. I've mucked about with lap steel a bit, but that preventing it from rattling against the fingerboard,
Yes.
Is that just a practice trying to be lighter and or
There are a couple of things. The one that rattles most is on the first string.
right?
I'm not sure if I can show you here. Here's a
Yeah,
guitar.
get it. Yeah,
Here's a
brilliant.
guitar. I'm like to strangle myself if I do this. Hold on. Okay. Is that really loud or is that okay? It's okay. Okay. So obviously, if you're playing like on the middle strings, then it comes down to just having the right kind of touch. But the first string is a funny one. So normally that's the one that causes problems, and obviously because the strings follow the radius presumably of the fretboard. So what you need to do there, I don't know if I can angle that, is actually angle the slide up. So what I'm doing,
Okay.
I haven't got my slide flat. I've tipped it up a
Yeah.
little bit. And the other trick is to try wherever possible to use the tip of the slide. So although I have a slide that is going to cover all 6 strings, in general, if I'm playing single note stuff, I'm trying to use like the top part of the slide, not the whole thing across. And quite a few slides that I've got are tapered, and they're thicker at the tip and thinner at the bottom, so they're a bit lighter, but they're meaty where you want them to be on the tip. So again, that helps if you're just using that thicker part.
Wait a minute, I also have a guitar to hand.
I thought you might have a guitar.
Hey,
I know you've got more than one. Oh, look that's beautiful.
I've got.
What's that?
Oh, it's a.
Very nice.
It was this guitar that stopped me taking flat tops seriously.
Oh, really?
I just can't. Yeah, sorry for all the people whose flat tops I've repaired, but I really cannot take them seriously. This carved spruce top. It's a 1936 Snell 30.
Wow.
Yeah, it found me. I didn't go looking for it. It was somebody found it in a landfill. Can you imagine?
Crikey.
All smashed. It was all in bits. It was like the back was 7 pieces and some pieces missing. And anyway, so I stuck it back together and she's all good to go. Those years ago.
Wow.
So I'm trying to use a tip. See, there you go. That's my immediate thing. I angle it and I'm rattling against the.
Yeah. So the way that I generally describe to people how big that angle should be is if you play and angle it such that the second string will ring open. So it's just tipping it just enough so that you can get the angle and you could play the open second string.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, okay. And all that muting behind, which comes naturally, luckily. But now oh no, go on. Hey, I tell you what, my tendency is to do this, is to play with my fingers and mute a lot of other stuff either side. But
which is good. That's exactly what you need to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need to mute with this hand, but it's this hand that I would say you don't need to mute. So yeah, exactly. This is a bit controversial, but let me demonstrate why. If I do this, if you hear all that, so all those harmonics and overtones, if you mute them, then you lose them. So basically, there's just this extra stuff behind or inside of that note that gets just completely squashed when you don't when you mute behind the slide. So Rycuda doesn't mute behind the slide. No one that I listen to or like mutes behind the slide. It's a bit of an urban myth, I feel.
So I'm keeping the rest of my hand off.
Yeah,
somehow.
Yeah, and you're fine. When you do vibrato, I mean, there's no way you want your hand muting, So.
Wow.
Quite relaxed. So I tend to have these 2 fingers just, I'm trying to angle it, kind of supporting the slide. The first finger doesn't really do much, but if I want to play chords, then my first finger's going to come into play. So, that kind of, but these fingers are just kind of just sat off the fretboard. You can see that.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of getting used to. It feels like you know, you're naked, but actually, once you get used to it, and you notice the difference in sound, it's like there's no going back. So
Yeah, gosh, it's like you're not holding onto the handrail.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's exactly the problem with slide. Because I love that. I don't know if you know Sean Tubbs, but he talks about frets as speed bumps. So it's like, here's the third speed bump. But you got no speed bumps now. That's the problem with the slide. So suddenly we're back to being, beginner violinists and all the problems that causes.
Yeah, and really interesting when you play one note and I play one note, they sound quite. The quality of the note is completely different.
Right.
Whereas if we were fretting it,
It'll be the same.
So we've got that mechanical advantage of the fret. So it's quite interesting that like any little thing you can control the quality of.
Which is why I love this thing, and this is why I mean, I don't think there's any getting away that from playing slide is hard, but there's just this thing about it that once it grabs you, it's like, as you say, you can control every aspect of the sound of that note, and that was always for me the most important thing about playing guitar just generally. It was like, whereas friends of mine, they were concerned about how fast they could play, I was always just trying to get the note to sound as good as I could. And that's kind of the thing with this as well. This is what you end up practicing. You end up playing like one note continuously for half an hour, just because you can get it to speak in different ways. It's unbelievable. It's as I said, it's very addictive. Once you start doing that, it's like, wow, all these sounds I can get.
So are you I think most people visualize the fingerboard in like the box across with like extension. That's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah.
So let's say we're doing the A minor thing.
Yep.
I picture that business going on here, and then I'm going up on the thin strings and going down the bass strings. There's a few twiddly bits up here that all connect.
Yep.
So are you thinking more of going up and down each single string there, or rather than going across? So I know I didn't express that very well.
I think in open tuning, I do think more like that, definitely. I think one of the things I like about playing in standard tuning is that I can do both, because all the across shapes are so familiar, as well as the longitudinal things. I've tried to get to a point where I'm just visualizing the whole thing anyway, rather so that I'm not thinking shape so much as I just know where the notes are. The way I describe it to students sometimes is, do you remember those fret-like guitars? I think they were called fret-like guitars in the 80s or 90s. Yeah. So that kind of ridiculous idea, but basically that you can just see kind of where all those notes are, and
right,
and then it becomes a thing of like what sound you want, because if you go if you want to do like legato kind of stuff, then you are restricted to staying on one string. But if you want to go, if you want to kind of leap around a bit more, then I'm probably thinking vertically in that kind of way. So so it's more of a sound thing, I think, because certain things I think don't translate as well with the slide as they would do in with normal playing as well. So I think there's a danger of thinking, I can just convert all my licks that I know into slide licks and play them the same way, and often it doesn't work. Often it just sounds wrong, and you either have to find a different way of playing the lick, or you just give up and go, actually that lick just doesn't work as well, and this lick that I've discovered that's similar actually sounds better with the slide. So you end up developing a bit of a different vocabulary,
Yeah.
which, I think is good as well. Um,
Has it changed your fretted playing, your normal playing? Normal's not the right word for it, but you know what I mean.
yeah, that was never normal. um, uh, I'm not sure it has. Um, I remember having a lesson with Tronzo once, and wanting a slide lesson, and he tried to get me to play normal guitar to try and emulate the sound of a slide, and I was really disappointed. It's like, I don't want to do that. I actually just want to play slide. Yeah, in theory it should do, but
Yeah.
I'd say probably not.
Okay. This is the reason I ask is because for 2 years I didn't play guitar. I didn't even own a guitar. I just played the musical saw,
Right?
and
Yes.
that's what I was doing, and I was actually doing that for a living, playing the musical saw. And
Yeah.
and when I went back to guitar, I was different. Well, I was
Right.
obviously it took a while for the dexterity to come back, but it doesn't take that long if you've known something for that mechanical business to work again.
Mm.
But I was different. I was a different player, which was odd. Clearly, my mind had changed.
Yeah. I guess. In a similar way, yeah, maybe you hear melodies slightly differently.
Mm.
Yeah, um, yeah,
But
maybe it has, and I've not noticed, but yeah,
yeah.
in theory it should do. Uh,
So do you have plans to do more with the slide teaching or playing?
um,
Are you going to be playing out?
yeah, well, playing, playing, I haven't really written seriously for a long time, and I am at the moment, and it's hard. um, but what I am planning on doing is writing a bunch of music, and I've done lots of recording from home, over the years, and in London studios and stuff. But I haven't done any studio recording here, so I'd actually, I kind of feel, rather than mess around with all the mixing and stuff myself this time, I just want to write the music, rehearse it, and just go in and record it and play it. And I think, yeah, if only just purely to feel like, um, I don't know. I suppose for some people, maybe just playing is enough, but I kind of feel like I just want to have a record of where I'm at with what I'm doing, wherever that is. And I'm not trying to put big expectations on myself. It's not like it's just more like, okay, here's a snapshot of what I'm working
Yeah.
on at the moment, and let's try and write some music that allows me to do that. And it's no big kind of deal, um, but the problem is, I don't know if you've spent a lot of time doing that at the expense of guitar playing, but that's what I've been doing. So, I'm down here at 6 every morning writing for a couple of hours before breakfast, and I don't play as much guitar at the moment as I have, so I go through phases of just like, actually, I'm just writing, and I feel really rusty playing, but, you know, it's I guess it is what it is, and you just got to then go back to playing afterwards. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
And it'll be there, and you can pick it up again, and you'll be back to where you were
yeah, and I'll
without
have
much
stuff to
trouble.
play, which is
Yeah.
the thing. It's all very well playing other people's music all the time, but it's nice to try and carve out something yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the plan, and I've got a little grant to do some. One of the things that I find, I don't know how much you've done of this, but like solo guitar stuff, I find it very difficult, and this silly thing doesn't make it any easier, but and not in the tradition of like great solo guitar players, but more just like, I've written this tune, can I play it and just do it on my own kind of thing. Um, so I've got a little bit of funding to do some performances of music that I haven't written yet. um,
Right.
just because it kind of keeps you on your toes to go, okay, well, what can I do if it's just me and the guitar? And
Yeah.
I think that's a fun thing to do, but scary.
Very scary. But of course, you are fearless now. We've established that.
Well, maybe not in that area. I'm not.
Yeah. 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 No, that would be, yeah. Yeah, that'd be quite an adventure going out on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, and I try not to do that with effects as well. So it's really is just the
Oh, mate,
guitar.
make it easy. Get a delay at least.
Well,
Looper.
I've got this little Princeton reverb and an attenuator built into the back of it. So basically, I can just plug straight in and get a little bit of overdrive, which really helps for slide. That's
Yeah.
a question that might have come up about
Fuzz.
compression, and fuzz is great, yeah, except that it completely strips all the dynamics out, which then means that like I mean I love fuzz when it's turned down and it's cleaned up. Um, but I have a hard time when it just obliterates everything and then
Right.
there are no dynamics anymore. But it does sound cool. That's true. And I'm using one now. Like I use one just all the time, really, but mainly kind of cleanish.
Yeah.
Just because it, you know, as opposed to using compression, it, you know, using overdrive with the slide just does a little bit of that without squishing everything completely. So
Yeah.
you know,
Electric
I like.
guitars are not clean. They shouldn't be completely
No,
clean.
yeah,
They sound wrong. If they're
they do.
clean, it's like you've got EMGs and you go through the PA or something. It's like, what? Can you imagine that sound? Nobody ever use it because it's clean. It's not. It's not, we don't want clean. No, no.
No, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, and even if you listen to like Wes Montgomery live recordings, like the amp's distorting, like, and he's got this really bright sound a lot of the time. You know, it's just,
Mm.
um, yeah, yeah. So, can I ask you a question?
Oh, heck, go on.
Well, it's about this, which I mean, you put this thing together. You may not remember, but this came in bits from the States at one point. But I know we talked a little bit about at some point about these lipstick pickups.
Mm.
Um, what's so special about them? Because they're just so unique.
It's great, and they're
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Hey, have a look. I don't know if you can see behind me. Obviously, there's a telly on the wall. I've got there's a guitar that is down there somewhere,
Oh, I can't
which is
see
a
it.
sprayed like it's a Dan Electro with a couple of lipsticks in it, sprayed
Oh,
like a
okay.
cow. Anyway,
Oh, okay.
they're actually made quite differently.
Okay.
I've been working on making some lipsticks actually, but it's super top secret, so don't tell anyone.
Okay.
And I might actually be over your way, and if you don't mind, and just do it when I've got some prototypes to do an
Great.
AB, because
Yeah, yeah,
yours
yeah.
is yours is 60 mid 60s or something.
64. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so they've got an Alnico 6 magnet
Okay.
for a start, which is kind of unusual. It's actually a really, really big magnet.
Okay.
So it's got a big magnet and very or less windings than if we take Fenders and Gibsons as standards. So you're getting, so that gives it quite dynamic. It's less compressed and quite a dynamic sort of sound. And the
Oh,
windings are wound literally, if that's your magnet, they're wound literally just around the magnet.
oh, okay. So
So
lengthwise.
it's the magnet sideways in there
Yeah.
like that, and the windings are wound around it. Yeah, and they just fit in that tube really. So they're
Yeah.
quite a different. They've got quite a low impedance.
Right.
Yeah, so they're quite an interesting pickup, but they're great, aren't they? There's something about them.
They're ferocious. I mean, I've
Yeah,
backed these down a lot because they were almost too live. You know, they're
yeah,
just, yeah.
and, and then give them some fuzz, and they are like I would rather my fuzz a bit fuzzier than you,
Yeah.
but they still maintain that clarity. They've got just the right power to hit the fuzz, where it
Okay.
doesn't just turn into a fizz.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just enough to make things live.
Mm.
Yeah, I really like them. I like them too, which is why I'm going to be making some. I don't know if it's a good economic decision, but but I can't help myself, so might as well go with it. Eh?
Oh, well, yeah, they do sound incredible. So,
yeah, they are really, really good. But yeah, the magnet's quite important. A lot of the modern ones will have a ceramic magnet in there.
okay.
And that's a very quite a harsh top and bottom, different kind of mid-range, very different sort of magnets.
So is that the Dan Electro ones you mean?
Yeah, a lot of
that?
those. A lot of those have that, although I think that some of them have Alnico 5s as well, but they have a standard, usually a standard Gibson size bar magnet. So it's 1/8 of an inch, so it's like 3.0 thick, whereas those are thicker.
Right,
They're
right.
almost double. Well, they are about double that.
Oh,
so there's a lot more magnet in there. Yeah, they are cool, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, just yeah. I mean, it's such a weird guitar in the first place, and then it's the life is in the pickups, really. So.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Dan Electro Wild thing?
You mentioned that to me, and I looked it up, and it's ridiculous. Yes,
it is. It is. Yes. It makes yours look very, very normal.
Yes. Yeah. There's got to be room for guitars like that.
Absolutely. No, I'm all in favor of those. Yeah, yeah. Hey, so people can find you on your One Finger Guitarist YouTube, which there will be a link below for.
Right, yeah. Instagram as well. There's a website as well, onefingerguitarist.com. So there's there's some little courses I did put up there, and it's kind of morphed more into a playing website at the moment, which is waiting for stuff to arrive. But I suppose probably most active on Instagram really these days.
Okay, and thank you very much for this little slide.
Oh, thank you. Lesson.
It's really cool to have to be able to ask direct questions with us both having guitars in our hands. It's
such a
very useful.
Funny thing, it little tips about the technique make such a difference, and then at some point you got to remember it's not all about technique, but it can be really hard to play without some little insights, I think. And none of what I told you I didn't invent. People have shown me all this stuff, and you just pick up things along the way, I guess.
But it's all really useful stuff that wasn't obvious. That meeting behind the slide, ooh.
Yeah. Play around with that, and as I say, if you just try and fit, because obviously, as I'm sure when you play harmonics normally, you can pluck behind but it's the same operates with the slide, and so you can do some quite cool things, but it really shows you what's missing if you are muting behind the slide. So.
Yeah, I think it's great because a lot of people. I mean, I think. There's a lot of people in my situation where play guitar forever, always been sort of interested in slide, but never really taken it seriously. So that's good. Now I know all the pitfalls, that it's going to hurt my arm. I'll get dangerously obsessed. I'll get dangerously obsessed with it. So that's cool. No, sign me up. Great. So Dylan, thank you very much, mate. It's been a really good chat.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate.
Glyn, great to see you. All right.